So usually we start, because we have a mushroom between us, in between a mushroom, or mushroom in between. But
Can we get a mushroom and place
Yeah.
it in between us?
yeah, let's do it. Ooh, we got an earthworm.
Ooh.
So between two humans.
Between two humans, yeah.
I love it. It's so pretty.
Yeah, Ganoderma polychromum. Grew it out in the Front Range on our farm.
Nice.
We're here at the MyCOreach van. I'm with Dr. Lauren Czaplicki. Is that correct? Awesome. Definitely honored that you would stop by and chat with us. Hopefully we can unpack some stuff, some simple questions, stuff like that.
Oh yeah, totally.
But just to start it off, I don't mind giving us a quick synopsis of who you are, what you do, and maybe what you're doing here at Telluride Mushroom Festival, 44th annual festival. Yeah.
81, I guess.
Wow. Well, as you said before, I'm Dr. Lauren Czaplicki, and I've been thinking a lot about identity because it's the theme this year, and I think the identity comes from like who I am before I have collected all these accomplishments and experiences.
Yeah.
I am boundlessly creative, and that has served me really well in my career, pioneering ways to clean up soils and solve other problems using myco-remediation.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, myco-remediation is definitely, that's honestly what propelled me into the mycology queendom, the space in itself. Yeah, so my background's in ecology and evolutionary biology with the CU Boulder.
Love it.
And I worked in antibiotic-resistant riverways along the Front Range. And I was exposed to like mycofiltration pretty early on.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. And I got into soil and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
that's awesome. So anything specific that you work on in the myco-remediation space?
Yeah, so I started out in Ohio. That was where I was born. And
Midwest.
yes.
Nice.
Toledo.
Oh, wait, Midwest.
Well, you guys don't count Nebraska,
Yeah, it's true.
but it is the Midwest.
Yeah.
Oh, agree to disagree. Yeah, so I grew up in this Rust Belt town that made glass for the auto industry. And then when the auto industry went down, right around the time that I was coming of age, I witnessed firsthand all the pollution, all the like closed companies that just left everywhere, messes. And when I was in high school, I felt a calling to clean up the environment, and I was really good at AP Environmental Science. That was the first. I'm going to nerd out here.
Yeah,
that was
fine.
the first textbook that I read cover to cover and was like fully engaged with.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this means something. And so I knew I wanted to do something in environmental something. And my high school had this really unique program where we would do a job shadow experience before we went on to graduate. And my mother had connections in this consulting industry, and she set me up with an environmental scientist and an environmental engineer. And I felt like I'm too impatient to be an environmental scientist. I'm very sensitive, and so I would get easily crushed if I were not able to do something about it.
Yeah.
So the environmental engineering path kind of came more naturally to me. And so then I went to Ohio State, and I chose that school because they had an ABET accredited environmental engineering program. They were the only one. And I was like, I want to save the world one tract of land at a time. And so I went there expecting to like learn how to do that with soils. And a lot of the technologies were developed for water. And so I came out knowing how to save the water one tract of watershed at a time.
Nice.
But during that time, I was hit by a case of senioritis. And TED Talks were big.
Yeah.
So, of course, I watched the TED Talk by Paul Stamets on 6 ways mushrooms can save the world. And it was so, like, synchronous. There was, like, such a synchronicity right there. Because at the time, I had an internship with the company that Paul worked with.
Oh, nice.
And I looked around and I was like, okay, there's got to be like some microremediation that's happening in these projects. And no one was doing it. And so I was like, well, why aren't you doing it? And they just told me that it didn't work and that I should just let it go.
Yeah.
And I do not take no. I did not take no well. And so
Luckily, yeah.
luckily.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, guys, I'm going to get like a better answer and I'm going to figure out how to make this work.
Nice.
So that took me to Duke University, where I studied with Dr. Claudia Gunch and Dr. Rita Svilgalise, and figured it out. And it turns out that through next generation sequencing, we were able to uncover that the fungi in the soils were able to do everything that we wanted them to.
Nice.
And the prevailing paradigm up until then was that you had to have this really well characterized fungus and then add it to the soils or add it to whatever environment. But soils are particularly chaotic.
Yeah.
And so they were just like, no. Like, it'd be like if we took someone from Norway and put them in the desert
Yeah.
and then told them to like do their thing.
Absolutely.
And there were like, you know, people already there that were like doing their job, and they were just kind of like shoving them out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this was happening time and time again. And so the approach that I took was to think like a mushroom, to put myself in the fungus like mindset and be like, okay, what do I need? What resources do I need? And knowing how they digest things externally, it'd be like they just like spit into their environment and then like absorb their like nutrients through their skin.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so like that's something that we know about wood rot fungi. And that's something that is pretty much shared among all fungi. So that must mean that like if I feed them what they're used to eating, then maybe they'll take care of the problem.
Yeah. No, I think you brought up a couple things, but like you talk about environmental science and then this environmental engineering. And I think what's really interesting is this applied mycology landscape is so unique that you need a little bit of everything to be successful.
Yes.
And what I, try to educate a lot about, and that's the big thing about MyCOreach while we're here, is to go, create that spark of curiosity and obsession, if you will, between the myco-curious and help them bridge the gap to myco-serious.
Yeah.
Because we meet a lot of people that are like, yeah, I want to do applied mycology. They don't know how, which is great. So you get a lot of citizen science. And then a lot of microremediation concepts are about bringing outside fungi based on a research publication into its non-native environment and trying to make it work. And there's a lot of hit or miss on that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really complex, but I think it's awesome that we're starting to understand that the indigenous microbes as well as indigenous fungi have adapted through either evolutionary pathways or epigenetics to acclimate or be able to break down the existing contaminant in the environment. And our job is to figure out what's there and then amplify that or and then install it, or just amplify what's already there by just feeding what's there. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's great. It's this idea of like augmentation shifting towards enrichment.
Yeah.
But we have to, for whatever reason, we don't like having like black boxes. I think it's just like our human curiosity. Like we need to know what's there so that we can like track back to, oh, this has happened like so many times before when this was present. So we're pretty sure that this is going to work again.
Yeah.
And that's like why I'm so excited about initiatives like SPUN's, the Society for the Protection of Underground Networks.
Oh, cool.
Because they're doing like soil sampling systematically throughout the world. And when I find something in one of my polluted soils, I'll be able to do more detective work about, oh, this was found in this forest over here, and it was like, it had these sorts of inputs to it. So maybe I'll feed it this sort of input.
Yeah.
And we don't know a lot about things we can't culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it also gives us like a peek into the ecologies of these things, because it's all connected. As I was talking with, I have a lot of really great conversations with people here at this festival.
Yeah.
And one of them, it was like I was out on a foray, and I was telling them how at first when I thought about mushroom hunting, I thought it was just about the mushrooms. But as I grew, I learned that it was about the trees, because then they'll tell you where to look for the mushrooms. And then it's also about the elevations, because like, boletes grow in certain elevations, and it's also about the time of year and the rainfall, because as the season like continues, they like move down elevation.
Yeah.
Or they move up elevation, or people pick them at the
Yeah.
lower elevation, so you have to like hike to the,
Upper ones.
the
yeah.
stash.
Yeah, but it's cool because it kind of peppers in a lot of the environmental areas,
Yes.
right? So like landscapes, maybe some geology, maybe some soil science, and then understanding, a little botany, and then, mycology, and they kind of all come together.
Yeah.
The forager's mind is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to the ecology of a natural system. I think that's also a really cool thing to push people to understand their environments.
Yeah, and like designing environmentally like responsible systems to clean up our environment, it's not coming from the outside. It's like mimicking a natural system. And then like to do that, we have to know all of these disciplines.
Yeah.
And I don't know all of those disciplines. So I'm looking for like partners to be like, oh, you know about this ecosystem here. Well, how do fungi interact?
Yeah.
And so that myco-remediation paradigm I've taken to adapt to my recent work since I've moved out here. So I lived in Ohio and was focused on environmental cleanups in Ohio. And then I figured out how to clean those up at Duke. And then I was so burnt out. I was just like, shit, like, I just want to live somewhere beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't care what I do.
Yeah.
And then I moved somewhere beautiful, and I figured out that I actually do care what I do.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, well, let's think about it. And I started coming to this festival and getting questions that I didn't know the answers to yet. Like, what can we do about heavy metals remediation? What can we do about wildfires? What can we do about the droughts? And so recently my work has pivoted to include developing local solutions to big environmental problems, mostly in the climate adaptation space. And so that's like using mycorrhizal, like feeding the mycorrhizal fungi, or moving them to like an environment where it's been like the ecosystem has been broken from a functioning ecosystem.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. And so I'm involved in a project with Co-Renewal it's called the Phoenix Project, and it has 5 sites all across California and Oregon along a climate gradient. And we're seeing which methods of microbial inoculation, fungal inoculation work in different situations to restore the ecosystems.
Oh, interesting. That's cool. Yeah, I've been a bit curious early on too, because my pull into the fungal realm was also through a microbial side, through soil building.
Yeah.
I worked in Oregon in cannabis. So I just didn't know that would be a job after college.
That's hugely mycorrhizal.
Yeah, and what was really interesting to me is just like diving into soil microbes and then learning about amplifying and collecting indigenous microorganisms and then re-inoculating them as the stomach for the soil. But then also realizing that this concept of probiotic farming is, in a nutshell, sort of remediation.
Yeah.
In some sense.
It's all the same. It's all restoring soil function.
Yeah.
Because the fungi don't eat the contaminant. Like, that's not what they're doing their thing for. They're eating the input that they're used to seeing. And so when we don't have this input, it's like they're starving or they're, you know. But when we have a functioning ecosystem, the fungi are putting out these enzymes and they're interacting with, you know, the leaf litter, but they're also interacting with the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons or with the PCBs or with any number of like really difficult to break down contaminant.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing we like to highlight too is like, yeah, you're at the festival, you're here this year. If you weren't, well, I guess what brings you back, you know, doing what you do, like what excites you about Telluride Mushroom Festival? And on the other side, second question would be, if you weren't doing what you do, would it be the same thing or would it be something else?
Okay, two different questions.
Yeah, we'll go with the first one.
We'll go with the first one.
So what brings you back every year? Like what excites you about the festival? What do you look forward to?
I just love how it blends the art with the science. I have a long-standing artistic practice, and I think that art can engage people in the community in a way that just plain cut and dry logic can't.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and I like to engage in fun things because, you know, engaging with like learning how exactly the intricate details of how our world is broken, like it's soul crushing, you know?
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this fungus-centered festival in particular because the enthusiasm and the diversity of people here. Like, people come into the way of the mushroom via so many different methods. Like, there are people who are into it from a culinary perspective.
Yeah.
There are people who are into it from, like, you know, what they can do for the environment, like myself.
Yeah.
And then there are people who come into it from like a just pure ecology perspective. Like Dr. Amy Honan.
Yeah.
She gave a talk one year about how, like, we still don't know how these fungi are living in deserts.
Yeah.
But they are. And it exposes me to different ideas and different concepts of what fungi can do.
Yeah.
And that all feeds into my work.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the creativity drive that this festival brings, and I do appreciate sort of the angle of what you're saying about art, because I think people can come, like you were saying, for gourmet reasons, or that they're just curious in general. Like, I saw some people behind me in the parade that were like having a great time, but they didn't even know it was happening. They didn't come to the festival. They're like, this is crazy.
And it's so welcoming.
Oh yeah.
Like, in years past, I have taught many iterations of my course, local fungi, local solutions. That now I have like a virtual course that we meet twice a year.
Nice.
But this year I didn't have to teach, and so I was like, well, should I even come if I'm not like helping?
Yes.
And then, like, the moment after I had that thought, I was like, oh, no, I have a lot of friends here, and I have the community, and they all are just so welcoming, and I'm going to meet new friends, and, like, just by participating, all of us in our own, like, identities, we're making this, like, microcosm metaphor for the mycelium.
Oh, for sure. And then, one thing, I also always like to ask people, like, what excites you, like, for the next year? Like, is there anything on the horizon that you're like, for me, it's like R&D, innovation, because I, like, on the cultivation side or the genetic side, and then what we're doing here for culture banking, these are all things that have been in the ether, but I feel like no one's tried to really execute it yet in a way that we're attempting to. And even in the cultivation side, everything's not figured out. Like, there's ways to grow mushrooms, but there's a lot of innovation that needs to occur.
Oh, totally.
And that's what keeps me going. So what excites you? What keeps you going?
So I'm really excited about the cold fire protocol, like establishing that in my area. This past summer, I cultured a bunch of local fungi that were doing the jobs that we want them to do.
Nice.
And I already have like some projects in that. And then next year, I'm really excited to see that grow and see how people engage with the mushrooms that come out of it, see how it grows into a like environmental protection standpoint.
Nice.
Because these techniques using fungi to rot wood is like, it's the perfect alignment with like nature and like our broken ecosystem.
Yeah.
We suppressed fire for so long, and it created all of this thick forest that led to like really susceptible tree populations for pathogens.
Yep.
More difficulty with drought, and when wildfire
Fire
comes
temperatures,
through, it's intense.
Yeah.
And so seeing how it plays out, how it impacts like my community is really, really exciting to me.
Nice.
And then I'm also super excited to see what we find with the post-fire microbial inoculation program.
Yeah.
Because something is going to work differently in a different situation. And so in our southernmost site in SoCal, we've got a lot of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And there were a lot of similar fungi to the ones that I found in my creosote-soaked soils. The polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that were just spilled from pollution.
Yeah.
And so I'm like really excited to see how that plays out, and to get it started in Colorado too.
Nice. That would be exciting.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to see you present on some information on that, some results. I would be super stoked, and I'm just glad that people like you exist. That you're myco-serious in that realm, because I think it's needed and required to really raise the level of awareness, education, understanding of our environment and interaction with the fungal queendom, and then utilizing this allyship, because we're surrounded by allies.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people take this approach as looking at them as tools, as inanimate objects to accomplish goals. But I think
they do what they want.
They do what they want. And
as a cultivator.
Yeah, I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah.
I'm just spreading spores. Like, that's my mission. And I'm like, cool, you jumping out, little guy? Great, good work, accomplishment. But no, awesome. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me. But is there anything you want to plug? Do you have any social media? Do you have a website? Do you have anything where people can learn more?
I have a website, fungalsolutions.com. And I also have an Instagram handle. I'm on Instagram at Fungal Solutions.
Nice.
And I also have a wait list where people can sign up for my course. Because I think that not everyone can do everything.
Yeah.
And initially I was very individualistic. I was like, I can save the world by myself. I can figure it out. I am creative.
Yeah.
But then I realized that we don't need to do everything ourselves.
Right.
Everyone has a university within some range of them.
Yeah.
And those universities are public, which means that they have an obligation to engage with the community. So a lot of the expensive, skill that you'd need to technically work these things out, you can get through reaching out to your local university or your local mushroom club, or just figuring out how to plug into different networks.
Yeah.
And regarding brownfields and Superfund sites, the community has a really big impact on what remedies get chosen.
Yeah.
So if they start to advocate, we want sustainable solutions. We don't want to just dig this up and move it somewhere else. We want something that tackles the problem instead of making it some poor community's problem.
Yeah. No, I know. I laugh because it's when I started digging into micromediation, I was like, how do they currently do it? And you're like, they pack it up and pack it out. And then they'll either dispose of, just move it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then or clean it up and then put it back. And you're like, Interesting. Like fire mitigation too. Like the most high-tech fire mitigation strategy is just to hike up, grab the dead wood, and bring it out. And you're like, I think there's a better way of doing that.
Yeah, and that's like removing so much like carbon from the forest where we need it.
Yeah. And they're probably burning it or something. Like it's like
Totally,
okay,
yeah.
what is going
They're
on?
burning it, they're selling it, they're the ones that they can't sell, they're just like dumping it in a landfill somewhere.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So we need more people to take your workshop,
Yeah.
obviously, so we can get some more hands on the ground to spread more spores. But yeah, well, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you
I'm
for
glad,
giving the opportunity
Yeah,
and having me.
I'm glad this is like me meeting you. Actually, I was like,
Yeah.
shit, I've heard a lot about you, so I was like,
I've been wanting to meet you guys for a really long time.
nice, cool. Well, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.